This video is sponsored by Raycon. More on them later. You know how the saying goes, in this world nothing is certain except taxes, YouTube periodically making their website worse, and death. I think that's how it goes. I can't claim to be an expert on what people say, but it does do a handy job of underlining what this video is all about. Dead protagonists and how dead wrong they were to think that they would make it out of this game alive. The mere concept of killing off the main character of a game sounds incredibly counterintuitive considering how protagonists are usually treated as self-inserts for the player, but if you can craft it correctly and have the death feel appropriate and earned, it can help a game feel anywhere from bittersweet to devastatingly depressing. And I need to talk about all of this while spoiling as few games as possible. Oh look, Kirby footage. Maybe he's implying that Kirby dies at the end of a game. No, he doesn't. Sorry for the spoilers, but you know, there's gonna be a lot of those flying around. Head for the bunker, children. You know, in a way I suppose it's fitting that some games decide to do away with the main character at the end of the game, because technically at this point they don't really have a use, especially if you don't plan on making a sequel. You know, it kind of reminds me about how this video sponsors Raycon, who decided to do away with a bunch of tangled wires getting in the way of your earbuds to offer you some really crystal clear sound quality straight into the earbuds and then into your ears. You know, and no one has to die in order to do all of this, so that's nifty. Nifty indeed, and I've been talking about Raycon's earbuds for what must be going on like 2 years now, and in that time, I've never felt the need to look elsewhere for earbuds since they offer such crystally clear sound quality that they're perfect for whatever you're doing, even more so if you're jumping around a lot because it's basically impossible to shake them out of your head. I usually wear them while at the gym or while cleaning around the house, and they make for a really good option if you're buying for Christmas. Even better, they start at half the price of other premium audio brands, but sound just as good if not better than other competitors. And since they come in 5 stylish colours, you can be sure that they'll suit whoever you're buying for. Plus, with free shipping and returns, gifting has never been easier. So if this all sounds wonderful and you fancy some new earbuds that you can purchase for a discount that will also support my channel, then you can go to buyraycon.com/rabbid or click the link in the description and use the code HOLIDAY to get 15% off across the site. That's buyraycon.com/rabbid and the code HOLIDAY to get 15% off everything. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Okay then, it's time to die. Spoilers, I suppose, you know, for everything. In theory, there's a million ways to kill a protagonist off at the end of a game, and as much as I would love to list some examples, I'm very mindful of spoiling more games than I need to get my point across, and so I need to get on with things and start talking about a way out. Co-op games, properly made, are wonderful things to experience with a friend who can commit to playing it to the end, and the best co-op games are the sort that take advantage of this unique way of experiencing a video game, and A Way Out is one of the most engaging co-op games I've ever played. Not the best, but it doesn't need to be when it plays with perspective as much as this and manages to keep the players invested all the way through the original conflict of the story, and then for a victory lap when it's revealed that one of the jailbirds one of you have been in control of has been an undercover cop all this time. It's one beefy twist that completely shifts the dynamic of the game for the last chapter from a chummy co-op game to a PvP showdown where neither player wants to die after spending so long with their character. And the more you want to not die, the more the other person is probably gonna die. It must have been fun developing A Way Out with this twist in mind, because you can build this relationship slowly over time to ensure that it feels organic and, you know, with an emphasis on endearing moments to make sure it seems like the two characters wouldn't want to kill each other at any point. Not only that, but over time, the player will grow attached to their character and they will defend their lives with all they've got. Those crazy fucking bastards. You know, despite the scenario that's been drawn up by A Way Out where Leo feels betrayed by Vincent's lies and Vincent having to now take down a trigger-happy criminal out for blood, I always thought that there would be some way for this to conclude without one or both of these characters ending up dead. At the very least, it'd be the sort of thing where both characters stumble over the side of a building and the game ends with a ton of loose ends all over the place and 2 very sad players. But no, we've got far more ambitious plans, and so A Way Out is actually a game where each player can influence which main character lives or dies, and between them only one of Leo or Vincent ends up killing the other. It's the most inevitable conclusion and possibly not a surprising outcome if you think about it, but I really like how the game keeps things open enough for either main character to die depending on how this PvP section goes. It's shocking either way and has the desired effect regardless of who ends up dying, but the biggest surprise for me is that A Way Out would think of doing this in the first place. It's a gutsy move to kill off a protagonist at the end, but even more ballsy if you're giving co-op partners some agency in deciding which of the two characters will die. Imagine if Left 4 Dead ended with every character beating the shit out of each other. The real enemies were the friends we made along the way. I reckon the more complex a story becomes, the higher the chance that a writer will end up killing off the main character at the end in a big heroic blaze of glory, having potentially written themselves in a corner and needing some kind of dramatic conclusion that will, feel satisfying and like a big full stop at the end of the game. This isn't set in stone by any means, but if a story starts getting complicated, then, you might as well start chiseling the tombstone now. That being said, Kingdom Hearts gets pretty wild, and I don't see many people lamenting over Sora's dramatic sacrifice at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 in order to save the world, so maybe it's less about games getting complicated and more about writers needing a way of punctuating an ending with one giant full stop. Possibly just a way of bookending an adventure if you want to think naively, but potentially also a way of underlining a complex plot revelation that leaves you scratching your head over the implications and the mechanics over how that happened and why I didn't see it coming earlier, and now I'm dead. It's been about 5 or 6 years since I last played Bioshock Infinite, and without reacquainting myself with the ins and outs of the plot, that's basically how I remember the epilogue of this game going down. Some timey-wimey shenanigans with portals and parallel universes and lots of Elizabeths, and a baptism that is just you being drowned in a river. Oh yeah, I've had that nightmare. A nightmare that the boys didn't help with either, but hey, that's fine. If it's this or trying to understand what actually happened, yeah, I think I'd pick the drowning too. Alright, so it isn't that bad, but Bioshock Infinite is the sort of game that is heading on one particular trajectory for a simple, albeit cliched and predictable ending, but then veers off into some funky bullshit that I used to understand, but I just don't have the energy for anymore, I'm gonna be honest, guys. The revelation that leads to main character Booker DeWitt getting dunked is that multiple different Bookers across loads of different alternate universes chose to be baptized and became the main bad guy Zachary Comstock, who you slammed into a bird bath a couple of hours before this. The idea being that Booker is always presented with this choice of whether or not to be baptized, and since the act of crossing dimensions fries his memory, Booker is stuck in this cycle with everyone else with no end in sight. Well, unless you let these 3 Elizabeths drown you, in which case there's no Comstock and everything is probably back to normal, but personally I just love the idea that the writers didn't quite know where to go with this ending and came to the conclusion that the only way out is for Booker to be out of the picture. Somehow he's alive again after the credits because multiverse logic is wonky as hell, but for the story it's trying to tell, I'm including Booker's cycle breakage as a death. You should know that I don't have the greatest confidence that anything I've said over the past 2 minutes makes a lick of sense, but fuck it! I'm all sweaty from all the research I had to do. Do you know what they say about the sweat of a man's brow? While looking up candidates for this video, I was trying to work out if there was any kind of correlation between a game's genre and the likelihood of the main character biting the big one. There aren't too many trends to find other than shooters doing it a lot since it's a popular genre these days, as is the killing of the protagonist, and RPGs because they have a flair for the dramatic. That's the only way I can describe it really, since RPGs tend to go in with big plots and events that are driven forward by strong narratives, and if you get to the point where the drama is reaching critical mass, then something has to give, and sometimes it's the protagonist. It doesn't fit every RPG, of course. If your Pokemon game is resorting to killing off the main character, it might be time to stop. But Persona games are mildly obsessed with mortality and the nature of the self, so they could be fun. Or incredibly sad, as the protagonist that you've grown to love over 50 hours of game gradually runs out of steam and can't make it to the end. I don't care if it's something I should come to expect since it's reasonably commonplace in RPGs, it still stings like a motherfucker. The end of Persona 3 is pretty incredible as is, with an emphasis on spectacle that other Persona games have attempted to match, but haven't quite nailed as well as this. And hey, I think Persona 3 as a game is a tad bit clumsier than its modern counterparts, but it is hard to notice that when you're fending off Nick's avatar from consuming all of humanity while awesome fucking music plays in the background. Persona 3 can be a very oppressive game, I suppose, where everyone's a bit self-destructive and there's this whole theme of mortality and how humanity will always be self-destructive and seek death. Hence why you summon personas by shooting yourself in the head. Yeah, try that nowadays and see how many articles Kotaku write about you. Nyx turns out to be so strong though that it can only be defeated by the protagonist sacrificing themselves, something that is covered more so in the answer epilogue than in the main game. What I love about this is that you get to see your party members reflect on who you were and what you meant to them. It's not completely new to see a game mourn your death, although the abundance of non-story deaths makes this kind of a funny concept. But it is equal parts heartwarming and strangely, disconnected. It's like watching your own funeral and hearing your own eulogy and understanding what people think about you now that you're gone, and that's kind of wild. Yes, I want battle for everyone's souls at my funeral. How is that even a question? Have we had a discussion recently about whether games can be considered art or not? It's probably been a while, so I might as well restart the argument with the thought that a main character dying by the end is pretty artistic. I've seen some plays in the past that people think are art that do basically the same thing. It's definitely the sort of melodrama that tends to leave a positive impression and appreciation of powerful storytelling, and you're probably wondering when I'm gonna do some unexpected turnaround and say, actually, this is all poop to me, but nah, I love this shit. Without giving away more than I have to, Rockstar like doing this a lot, and I wouldn't call many of their games overly dramatic, so maybe those guys are just talented enough at killing off important characters without being too high and mighty about it. The games where it does happen never feel forced either, as if there was only one way of getting to the credits, and how you just have to come to accept that John Marston is human and has his limits. I mean, you could have fooled me. What I love the most about the Red Dead Redemption games is that they sugarcoat the Wild West setting just enough to make it enjoyable, if you know what I mean by that, because, they can talk about the realistic weather and the believable behaviour of wildlife and, the fact that horse testicles shrink in cold weather, but at the same time, there's something like Deadeye, where you can, very easily and very accurately kill a whole bunch of enemies, and it's incredibly unrealistic, but really fun and useful. Until it isn't. In a way, it's actually encouraging that Deadeye has its limits, although it sure doesn't seem like it during the main game. It's just this incredible superpower that can obliterate a lineup of enemies with the press of a couple of buttons, and in a game that is fearsomely dedicated to realism, it can come across as a bit too video gamey. Yeah, I know, funny thing to find in this interactive gaming thing. It's all fun and games until you're given just way too many people to shoot though, and so it transpires at the end of Red Dead Redemption where John Marston lets his family escape as the FBI catches up with him and confronts them with a big tasty dose of Deadeye, but that's a lot of bad guys. Too many, as it turns out, and reality strikes back with lots of bullets, and that's the end of John Marston, ladies and gentlemen. It's shocking to see the main character gunned down so unceremoniously and at a point where the game seemed to be winding down to a peaceful epilogue, but perhaps treatment this harsh is indicative of the time period and how the government viewed reformed outlaws? Clearly that's what real-life cowboys were missing. A magic gun slowdown thing. Otherwise Marston would have died a hell of a lot sooner than this. Hey, do you know what the best case of a game where you die at the end is? Life. Well, apart from that, there's an interesting dynamic that arises when a character's death feels earned. That might sound confusing, but it's one thing having the protagonist killed kind of out of nowhere, but it's something entirely more profound when the game gives you a fighting chance, or even just the illusion of a fighting chance. That probably brings up a debate over forced loss scenarios and whether games should present players with impossible situations just to make a point, but when done well, it's like goddamn poetry. Halo may be inconsistent now, but it was pretty close to perfect for a spell from basically the first game until whenever Halo 4 came out, and there's some top quality games in there. Master Chief is too cool to die though, so we're gonna have to find a game where he isn't around to be placed in no-win scenarios that coincidentally only happen to more disposable characters. Halo Reach is a game all about disposable characters, and its role as a prequel that stars a bunch of characters that are new to this game gives it this weird Rogue One vibe, where you know this lot need to die, it's just a matter of when and how. And damn do they nail the how. And I suppose the when as well, but it'd be weird if these characters died before the end of the game, since it would leave a wide open epilogue with nothing to fill it with. In reality, Halo Reach's epilogue is defined by a no-win scenario where noble teams stay behind to fight the Covenant for long enough to let the Autumn escape unharmed. It's such a devastating attack by the Covenant that the fall of Reach was always inevitable, but that still leaves Noble Team, and specifically Noble 6, with an unwinnable fight, a fact highlighted in bold by your current objective being to simply survive. Nothing more complicated than that, almost like an admission from the game that you're stuck here with no hope to escape, and definitely no hope of overcoming these endless waves of enemies. It's emotional for sure as you feel the moment where there's just too many enemies and you inevitably run out of health, but I love that you get to play it for yourself. It's 1,000 times more powerful that gameplay and story are knitted together so perfectly in a way that lets you feel the battle slipping away from you. Of course you die at the end, you never stop sending bad guys! Fucking game's glitched and the spawns are broken, what's a boy to do? Having the protagonist die can be a bitter pill to swallow sometimes, but in the case of games like Halo Reach, where you have control the entire time, it's a lot more understandable, and I think, overall, I'm pretty pleased with how things panned out. This is RabbidLuigi, and if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more in the future, and if you want to watch something right now, there's a video here about the scariest moments in Kirby games. I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including Jerome Sankara, Sarah Malion, and the Green Scorpion. Thank you for watching, and one day Mario will die in a game.